it's okay to prepare before a podcast, prepare before a video. But when all is said and done, they've asked you, sometimes maybe they've told you to be on camera, but it is because you're an expert of some sort. And I think that should hopefully lower some of that anxiety of like, you know what? I am good at this. I do know my stuff.
Have you ever said, I don't like how I sound? Or worse yet, I hate how I look on video? Well, you're not alone. But here's the truth. How you show up on camera says as much about your authority as what you say on the mic. In today's episode of the Podcast Interview Marketing Show, I'm joined by my longtime friend, the guy who first coached me how to feel comfortable on camera, Jeff Long of True Focus Media. We're diving deep into how to intentionally show up professionally and authentically in today's video-first podcasting world. Whether you're preparing for your first interview or your 50th, Jeff unpacks the practical steps you can take to improve the look and sound like the expert that you already are. From camera angles and lighting to the mindset and posture, it's not about vanity. It's about clarity, credibility, and connection. If you're serious about using podcast interviews to grow your brand and your business, you can't afford to miss these conversations. It's time to master the art of being on camera. How you look on video says so much about your professionalism, your expertise, and we get asked this a lot. And I wanted to bring on the man that helped me first get comfortable on videos. Jeff Long here. We've been longtime friends, and really today going to be talking about how to look comfortable and confident on video. Jeff, welcome.
Tom, thanks so much for having me on the show here. I love the topic. I love what you're doing, and I'm excited to talk about being confident on camera today.
Well, let's talk about that because I can still remember it was probably a dozen, maybe 15 years ago. We're sitting in Jamie Slingerland's living room. You've got the camera there. I'm staring at the lights and trying to do an interview with the person. And you coached me through that on that so much to feel comfortable and confident. So talk to me a little bit about that. Somebody is getting ready for their first podcast interview or their next podcast interview. What kinds of things should they be thinking about to look confident and comfortable on video?
Yeah, so a couple things. For whatever reason, I find that video, whether it's a podcast or like a high-end production where there's, camera and crew and all that, video is a great equalizer. I don't know how or why, but like I have had like high-level famous executives or, whatever, and sometimes they just melt on camera. And so the first thing I want to say, my heart goes out to everybody watching this is like, it's normal to feel awkward, afraid, intimidated, by a silly camera, especially that blinking light. Once that goes on, I know cameras don't have really blinking lights anymore, but you get the idea. So I guess my first point, Tom, is like, it's normal to feel a little anxiety before you go on a podcast, before you're on a professional video. And so I guess with that, just know that you're not alone. It's normal. It's rare when people are excited or like they're just kind of out of the gate. They do an amazing job.
I remember when podcasts first started, people would say, I don't like the sound of my voice.
Totally.
All right, that's universal. And then the next one is once, today 96% of the podcasts have video. It's like, well, I don't like the way I look on video.
Yeah. And you're right. Nobody does. I hate it too. Anytime, when I watch this, I'll be like, oh man, do I really sound like that? But you just go with it. Like, who cares? Nobody's walking around like pointing and laughing at you because of your voice or how you look. It's just in our own mind. We just have that perception.
Well, and I don't think they're critiquing us, but there are certain things that are maybe just that we do that makes us look less professional, right? One of the things that I see a lot of times is people will be looking down, right? Looking at the person and the cameras above or below, or they've got them in a different monitor. and they're
Mhm.
looking away from it. So little things like that. What are tips that you give someone on where to look, right? I can remember when we were sitting down there. Where do I look? Do I look at the person I'm interviewing? Do I look at you? Do I look at the camera? What do you think about in that?
Totally. So it depends what type of video. So let's take this podcast for example. So um I know you and the audience can't see it, but my webcam is a different camera than my that's one than what's built into my computer. So it's a separate camera, right? So technically, it would be easier for me to be looking slightly down at the computer at you, Tom, versus into the camera, which is where my audience is, right? So just be aware, like the camera lens is your audience. So be looking at them. Sure, it might be easier for you to be looking elsewhere, or if you're just feeling awkward to look down, but like your audience, wants to see you, wants to hear your expertise, to hear your story and feel that emotion that's coming through. And there's something psychologically, if I'm not looking at you, Tom, and I'm just kind of talking over here, there's almost like this awkward disconnect. Like, where's Jeff looking? Like, why doesn't he care about me? He's looking over there. But so it's it's a lot of these little things that we'll kind of talk about today that make a big difference. Um, Another thing is your webcam or camera, we'll just call it level. So I always recommend to put it eye level. So if you're using a laptop, maybe that's your only camera, put it on a stack of books or somewhere where the laptop is level. Because if we're looking up your nose, it again, it's just awkward. And there are some even aesthetically or visually, you look your best when a camera is kind of eye level versus too high, too low, on the side. You can actually, it helps kind of slim you down a little bit if it's that eye level, again, versus if it's too high, too low on the side. So again, lots of these little things. I know we'll touch on more, but those are just a
So
couple thoughts right out of the gate.
So I should be like an influencer and raise the camera above. So when I'm taking the picture,
Right.
my daughter's the most honest people in my life used to tell me that, right? Dad, nobody wants to look up your nose or at your chins, right? Raise
Right.
the camera up.
Yeah, it's there's a whole, psychology, and I'm not pretending to be a camera psychologist. I've just, studied a lot. I've observed it a lot. I've been doing, video marketing since 2003, and that includes video podcasts and whatnot, but also just high-end video, content. And so, those things are key. Another thing along with video, and I know we're talking specifically video, but with any good video, it has to have good audio and good lighting, right? And so if you look good, but we can't really hear you, uh, most of communication is auditory. It's not just visual, but it's actually auditory. So be aware of your video, or your audio in your videos. So if we're doing a podcast, probably don't want to use the built-in microphone that's 3-ish feet away from your mouth. You want to use the built-in one, or excuse me, an external one, and that'll help you sound and subconsciously look your best.
Let's get real here because this is the second time we logged in to record this. At the very beginning, we both logged in and Jeff said, "Are you using your nice microphone?" And I said, "Yeah, that's what it says." And he said, "Tap on it." I tapped on it. He couldn't hear it. So we left, we came back, and it was like, now it's picking up the right one. So before, here I am talking into a $400 microphone, getting picked up by the internal microphone, and it sounded like I was calling in from a bathroom.
Yeah, and it's again, all these little tweaks or improvements, add up to a more professional sounding and looking, video or podcast or whatever you're trying to produce. And so it can be easy to get overwhelmed by those details, but my encouragement is to pay attention to those details because they do make a difference for sure. Yeah,
Let's
and it happens to all of us, right? Just like you. I mean, you've done, how many podcasts over the years, and somehow the software wasn't doing its thing and it wasn't doing it right. So we had to log out, log in, no problem.
Exactly, but catch it beforehand.
Yeah.
So let's talk about lighting because that's something that people struggle with, and some people will say, "Oh, you've got to use this or you've got to use that." What's your advice on looking professional with the lighting?
Yeah, so, you know, since I'm a video guy, I'm obviously more inclined to, use all of that, and I'm kinda using a different setup here, so in my mind, I look a little, different than I'd like, but, everyone's picky about themselves. So let's talk just best practices um, if there's shadows on you or behind you, or, I mean, we can even talk about distractions, in your background at some point. Like, so I typically recommend using lighting. Now, it's funny, the 2 lights I have on the side, one's a cheap Costco light that's probably more of like a desk lamp, and the other is a cheap Amazon light that is also more of like a desk lamp. Like, it's not expensive. They're probably, I mean, easily less than $50, probably like $30 for both of those together. So we're not talking about something breaking the bank here. But yeah, again, if people can see you and you're well illuminated and there's not these harsh shadows, it makes you look better. So why not? It's not a cost thing, and it makes you look better.
Yeah, and controlling it. That's one of the things I learned early on. Uh, Jeff, you've been to our house. We live way out in the middle of the country. I don't have blinds, or at that time I didn't in my office. And I remember one early morning I was doing a podcast interview with somebody in Australia. He paused and he said, "Do you want to pause this so you can close the drapes?" And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because the sun's about ready to hit you in the eye." And what he saw was the sun coming down here, and it was about mid forehead. And it's like, ooh, I didn't even catch that. Right. And it looked unprofessional. So it's like control the variables out there. If there's lightning out there or a sunny day, well, like before this, um, I thought I looked very washed out. Hey, I I'm the original white boy
More so
here.
than usual.
I always look washed out, but, the reflection off the snow was making it even more so, so trying to control those lights.
Yeah. Yeah. And, as most people are in their home office, for podcasts like this, um, you might have to do some rearranging of your office or your space wherever you are, right? So be aware of what's behind you. Is it crazy cluttered? I did it was a client meeting with somebody that worked at a company, and they were home office that day, and they happened to be in their bedroom, which is fine. It's all fine, right? This wasn't published or anything publicly, but his dresser, a couple drawers were open behind him, and the bed was unmade, and I didn't care because, again, it was just a business meeting, no big deal. But I kind of chuckled because, like, if that was a podcast, that would have not been a good situation. It doesn't make him look good. And so be aware of what's behind you. If you have to declutter or clean up, or maybe if you do a lot of podcasts, whether it's your own or you're a guest, um, then maybe have a little space that's angled in a certain way to uh, minimize the distractions or minimize the clutter, right? So you can turn your computer or move your laptop or go somewhere else so that it's less distracting.
I was gonna say, now you've seen The Office, so everything up in front here, that's all sound deadening. All those
Mm,
papers around the table, that's for sound deadening, but everything behind me is gotta be controlled, and this even the same way of the doors over there. There's no chance somebody's gonna open the door and automatic or accidentally walk onto screen.
yeah, yeah. And
Now
the good thing with all of that is, especially with podcasts, there's editing there. Like, so even with a professional, let's say there's a video crew or whatever, we can edit a lot of things, but again, you want to minimize, any editing or any interruptions or things like that. I want to get back to more, even the internals, right? What's in your head. So let's kind of talk about some practical things, once the podcast is going, once the video is going, I've noticed that when people, well, let me back up. So they say, the old joke is, video ads, what, 10 pounds or 20, you name your poundage there. I find that video sucks the energy out of you 10, 20, 30%. Meaning, for people that kind of talk slow, and really thoughtful. Like it really sucks the energy out. So I recommend, and kind of what I'm doing is I talk a little faster when I'm on camera. I also use my hands. Maybe you can't see them, with our webcam set up right now, but like I try to use my hands. I try to be animated. And so again, for whatever reason, the camera like sucks the energy out of you. And I'm not asking you to be not yourself, but I am asking you just to be, again, a little bit aware. People want excitement. They want, if they don't want to be bored. And so if you're going to keep people listening to your podcast, again, if you're just a slow and methodical person, I get it, but it's a little harder to listen to, even if people, put the podcast on one and a half or 2x speed or whatever. Uh, so those are just a couple, I guess, other practical things there.
I even think in today in this AI world, sometimes you see, an AI generated video of Jeff, right? And, they can translate it. Now you can speak German, Spanish, all the rest of those. But it always looks different because they don't have that same level of animation or interaction. They're trying, but they're not there yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and so, with that, it is hard to there's a lot of things to focus on. I would say, with everything I've said so far, the good thing is that, you've been asked to be on a podcast or to be on a video or whatever capacity we're talking about here because you're some type of an expert, right? Maybe you're an expert in your field, you have a story to tell, or there's some reason why you're on camera. And so sometimes it's as easy as, before the camera rolls, or maybe it's the night before, write out some bullet points. What do you wanna talk about? Maybe it's, "Hey, here's the 3 tips I wanna provide on the podcast tomorrow," or, "Here's 3 stories I want to talk about that demonstrate those 3 tips." So it's okay to prepare before a podcast, prepare before a video, but when all is said and done, they've asked you, sometimes maybe they've told you to be on camera, but it is because you're an expert of some sort, and I think that should hopefully lower some of that anxiety of like, "You know what? I am good at this. I do know my stuff." And I think that can get lost in the nervousness or anxiety that people might have about being on camera.
I think being in your own home office or home studio
Yeah.
makes it so much easier,
Yeah.
right? I've been now in television studios, and to me, that's stressful, right? But being in someone's home, that was a whole lot better. Being in my own office is a whole lot more comfortable because it's my surroundings here.
Yeah.
And it's my background, which is sort of consistent. So let's talk more about the background of what people see. What's a good background? What's a bad background? What to think about?
Yeah, I think a lot of it goes to your audience and your personality, right? So, who is your audience? Are they, business owners and entrepreneurs, or are they high level executives? Are they homeschool moms, or are they, fitness gurus, or whatever that is, right? So, be thinking about your ideal audience, your customers, what who they are, and that should obviously reflect you as well. So there's no misalignment there, but, have an appropriate background setting to that audience. And then personally, who are you? What do you like? Like I said, I have a little different setup today. In the past, I have, some bookcases behind me, and I have a couple like personal things that just mean a lot to me, and even some things from our friend and mentor that's passed away, Dan Miller, is was on there that I'm gonna kind of bring back. So yeah, I think bookcases are kind of the easy thing because there's ways to put books and other materials on there, which is nice. But yeah, just spend some time or bring out the Zoom or, whatever you use, software, and turn it on and just kind of be looking behind you at what's there, the lighting, the background, the books, the distractions, and kind of, tailor it for that.
I originally used to have the bookshelves all the way behind me, right? And the feedback that I got from people that it was too distracting. right? Because they were trying to figure out what book it was and everything. And now I I really like that of having it on the side because a lot of times I will move the books around, right? The book that I feature there might be from the person I'm interviewing or um, Dan Miller, right? To put his book up there back in the day, he would always notice his own book there. So it was one of those things to put up there. But I find having a consistent background is almost like with the brand there too,
I would
where
agree.
people expect to see that.
Yeah, I would agree.
And, I think of, Dave Ramsey, right? There's a great example. Whenever you see a video of him, you see him in his studio. So instantly you know it's him. And even when you've got other personalities now speaking for him, it's still in his brand, and, I think about that even I call it the Dave Ramsey uniform. Have you ever seen Dave Ramsey out in public, in a video or anything like that? I can guarantee you he's wearing a pair of jeans, very nice jeans, a button-down shirt, a sport coat, and if he's got a picture with anybody, his hands are always in his pocket. And someone explained to me that there's consistency there, that that's what you expect him to look like. Now, it might be a different jacket, a different shirt, but it's like, yeah, that looks like Dave Ramsey. And then he intentionally puts his hands in his pocket that he takes pictures with lots of people, right? So if there's a picture of him and someone that later shows up, uh, on the news for a felony or something like that, it's not that he has his arm around him, his
Interesting.
hands were in his pocket. But I
Yeah.
think that's consistent too. And what's your thought about that of when you show up on camera, showing up in a consistent way?
I think again, it's all being thoughtful. Like, Dave Ramsey there put a lot of thought into all of those things that you just mentioned, right? He didn't just show up and granted, he has lots of media exposure and training and practice, but it's not complicated, right? It doesn't cost anything to think about these things. And so, one thing I always say is whatever you're wearing, try to have it be something that you feel comfortable and confident in, right? Don't wear something you're just kind of like itchy and uncomfortable and just kind of you're fidgeting the whole time. Wear something. I happen to wear this blue shirt a lot on podcasts. I don't know why. I love it. My wife says I look good in it, so I'm going with it. And so I rely on her for certain shirts and things that complement me and my skin color and my season. I don't, that's a whole different thing. But um, so yeah, I think thinking about those, what you're wearing, how you're portraying yourself is critical. Um, One thing along with that just kind of popped into my head is even how you're sitting in your chair. A lot of times on a podcast or a video, you're sitting. I always tell people if you feel comfortable how you're sitting, you probably look terrible on camera. So if you're just kind of like slouched down and you're all comfy cozy, it probably doesn't look good on your stomach, so if you can sit up nice and straight, I'll be honest, I don't feel comfortable in my chair, my shirt and my clothes I feel comfortable in. But yeah, the more you can sit up straight, good posture, it, kind of sucks your stomach in, it makes you look your best, things like that. So,
What do you think of standing versus sitting?
um, I mean, for a podcast, I always find that video podcasts where the person has a standing desk, for some reason, it kind of throws me off. I don't know why. Um, but for a business type video or things like that, yeah, I think it's a personal preference. I find that when people are standing, they are a little more animated. They can move their hands. The challenge with that is, and I just did a video shoot recently with a company, and their CEO could not stand still. He was moving, he was left, right. He was, I mean, kind of like this picture of ADD, which is fine. That was his personality, his strength, but also his challenge. And so if you're a mover, sometimes locking you down is better because to the viewer, it's like, okay, where are they going? Where are they going? We can't keep track of you because, the camera's trying to follow you and it can become a nightmare.
I think of speaking on stage. How many times on the prep there's a red line on the left and a red line on the right, and the cameraman says, "Do not go beyond this, or you fall off the stage."
Yep.
And it's like, what do you mean? There's another 20 feet of stage. Well, not with the video. There
Right.
isn't. All right, so that's one. Or as you mentioned, I've tried to do them standing up before, and I've got a standing desk, but what I would find is I start to get tired and I start to go back left or right. So there's a couple things there. One, um, if somebody's just listening and you start changing your position, it sounds like you're moving, closer and farther away to the mic like you are. The other thing too is that as the team goes and repurposes, right? A lot of the repurposing is they're trying to make it fit LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, whatever it is. They cut off the left third and the right third and keep the middle third. And if I keep going in and out, it looks really funny on the repurposed.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because back when we're talking about our studio or home office, wherever we're recording, that is a consideration, right? Are you clipping this into reels and things like that, whether it's horizontal, horizontal or vertical or square, whatever that is. Again, just be aware that that could be distracting if your office has something, and then if you put it in a vertical or a square, then it looks weird. And so just kind of be testing those things out.
One of the words that you said that keeps coming back is thoughtful, right? And I remember years ago, I had two sales calls, discovery calls that were back to back. The first one was with the gentleman. He's on the Zoom call and the computer is in his lap. I'm looking up his nose and there's a light behind him. It looks like he's in the witness protection plan. Now, was he a great coach? I don't know, but there was no credibility there. There was no authority. Flip side is the next call, I'm talking with someone and she's dressed very nicely, right? She's got a credenza behind her. And Jeff, her book is put up on the credenza, and there were tulips on the credenza that matched the color in her book, right? And I mentioned it to her, how professional that looked. And all she did was smile and thank me and said, "Thank you. It was on purpose." And it's that idea of she had put that through. And if somebody was looking to hire an executive coach and the person in witness protection plan gave out a price, it was going to be probably too expensive, right? If she puts out a price, oh, I can see why that is. Now, I don't know what else was in there. A friend of mine, Mary Kelly, used to talk about that her studio was in the laundry room. There was a washing machine there. The laundry was there. But you know what? She's a professional speaker, and that's where she looked. She looked great there. So I think that thing that you talked about of being intentional, looking at that from the viewer's standpoint is so, so powerful.
Exactly. There was a man, probably 15 plus years ago, there was a podcast I used to listen to. I don't think they have it anymore, but and he would always say, marketing is everything and everything is marketing, right? Everything we do is marketing. Like you mentioned, the book behind us with the matching flowers versus, the shadowy fellow in the lazy boy or whatever, right? Like he might have been a wonderful coach, but not a great marketer. And there are these little things that do make us look better. They give us more. I call it, they showcase our authority, right? They don't give us any more authority than we already have, but it puts it front and center. It showcases that we are an expert in our field and we've paid attention to these things, which is critical because obviously we all have lots of competition. Nobody's competitionless. And so the more we can set ourselves up as different than others, not just in our content or our knowledge base, but in our presentation and in our thoughtfulness is key. One other thing that I did want to hit on, no matter the type of video you're on, again, whether it's a podcast or professional video, I would even encourage you, especially if you're more on the anxious side, 5 minutes before the podcast, do some breathing exercises, right? There's box breathing. So 4 in, then you hold it for 4, then 4 out, then you hold it for 4. So it's, 4, 4, 4, 4. Or you can just breathe in for 4 seconds, breathe out for 6. And that's kind of key. The breathing out for more than you breathe in does help kind of expel some of that stress. And so, there's ways. Another way is it's called the Superman pose, right? So if you stand with your hands on your hips and your chest out, and you just whatever. I don't have the numbers in front of me or the study, but I've seen that, that increases your testosterone and your kind of this power stance, right? So, or maybe it's doing a couple push-ups or sit-ups or squats, or like get your body moving before you're on camera does kind of elevate that the chemicals in your brain and in your body. So when you do sit down, you're just a little more like, I don't know, amped up in a good way. You're more excited, you're not lethargic, right? It's easy to be lethargic sitting on our office chair, maybe not even eating the best of foods.
So you would say that's almost like a pre-routine then
Mhm.
before you go on video. It's the
Yep.
same way golfers always address the ball the same way. They've got that routine when people go into the batting box for baseball players, and before you go on video to have that pre-routine there.
Exactly. Yeah, because it is, yeah, there's things you can do physiologically that do rewire your brain, your energy, your excitement. And so take advantage of those, right? I get it. You might be nervous, you might be lethargic today, you might be tired, whatever it is, that's real. But let's try to like hack your body, hack the system, and give you again every opportunity to showcase your expertise, to market yourself or tell your story, or whatever the purpose is that you're on camera.
Jeff, what's ordinary to you is amazing to others. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts, or how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, thank you. One other final thought, and again, I could probably do a 3-hour episode on this. So one other thing is, especially with clips and reels, is the importance of speaking in shorter sound bites. If you're like me, sometimes I can talk on and on, and it's hard to rein yourself in. But if you can kind of talk in those shorter sound bites, you don't have to give your whole life story in one breath, and so, try to shorten the main point you're trying to convey, and you don't have to keep rambling, probably what I'm doing now, so I'm going to cut that off. But let me let me answer your question there. Yeah, my marketing agency, we primarily work with B2B companies, but I have experience working with a whole host of influencers, B2C companies and things. I've been doing this since 2003, right? So the audience doesn't really matter. But you can find me at truefocusmedia.com, and I'm actually most active on LinkedIn and some on YouTube, obviously putting my videos, but most of my videos are kind of client videos, so they go on their social media channels and whatnot.
Check out True Focus Media. My friend Jeff Long, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom.
Video isn't going away. In fact, it's more essential than ever. And after this conversation with Jeff Long, you've got no excuses for showing up looking like you're in the witness protection plan. See, this episode was packed with gold. Simple, smart tips that you can apply today, like raise your camera, check your audio, control your lighting, be thoughtful about your background and appearance. Most importantly, show up with energy, clarity, and confidence. You're an expert. Own it. Don't hide your brilliance behind bad lighting or low energy. Stand tall, maybe literally, and prepare to deliver your message with the excellence it deserves. If you want to see how Jeff helps brands look world-class on camera, go and visit truefocusmedia.com or connect with Jeff on LinkedIn. Because, as the great Fernando Lamas taught us on Saturday Night Live in the 1980s, it's better to look good than to feel good. And you look marvelous.